Daryl, we've got a lot of people here, like with a focus on time management. It's an area I know no one's ever mastered it, but from a standpoint of what are the biggest adjustments you made to maintaining and growing revenue since you started working with us, and some tips you can give to others?
Yeah, but before starting working with the recruiter you might, I probably just didn't have the paradigm of what was possible and didn't even know what targets to set, on a daily basis. So it's hard to measure yourself against that when you don't know what targets to set. So probably the first thing was just getting the right level of activity going each day, understanding those ratios, and then it became a little more predictable. I know from the first time that I went through the metrics portion of the optimizer and got our metrics down and put together, that first year I was working with you guys, I was able to predict my revenue within 2% just based on the amount of activity we were doing each day.
And you have multiple recruiters.
Yes.
Predict your revenue within 2 percentage points.
Yeah, the
It's
first year. The second year is probably within five, but it's still reasonable,
yeah.
in terms of being able to predict it. Once you understand what's possible, measuring yourself against what's possible, or putting your vision together, what you want to achieve, setting your targets in alignment with that, and then just following that plan.
And say more on that and some of the things you did, even from that and like a time management perspective that allowed that consistency.
It really comes down to, how many MPs and RPs you make. And then each one of me, myself, and my two other recruiters, we call in call blocks every day. We've got our calendar set up in the specific call blocks. We have our call list ready to go before we even show up. So all you got to do is just start making dials once you get to that call block, and just put everything else out of your way and just sit there and just hammer those dials for that particular call block. So I've got two call blocks a day. My other two recruiters have three call blocks a day.
Describe what for those that don't know, describe what a call block is. This is
Well,
from a time
yeah,
management perspective, this is
yeah,
a brilliant thing to
yeah,
put in place.
yeah. For me, every morning from 9 o'clock to 10:30, I'm making dials. I'm calling people. Now I've got a different campaigns I'm doing each day, but I'm making dials every day from 9 to 10:30 and then one in the afternoon. Now they have three call blocks. I think they've got two one at 90-minute and one 60-minute call blocks each day, but you just set aside a specific amount of time. You have a list, and we just go through and just hammer through calling those numbers.
And what do you say to those people that have the belief around nobody picks up the phone today, or it's really hard to get a hold of people on the phone?
7% of the people that we call answer the phone. Some days it's more, some days it's less, but it's on for the last 12 months, it's been 7%. So I know 7%. I build my plan based on that number.
Excellent. Uh, and then what, like, when you talked about some of the areas you didn't even know to work on, what were some of those areas that you kind of like, oh, if I do this, then this happens?
What brought me to Recruiter U to start with was I was very frustrated with contingent recruiting, period, of spending a lot of time with a client and then walking away with nothing. And I was looking for better techniques to sell retained search. And I think, I had originally, I don't know if you guys even sell this anymore. You had this recruiter package for like $400 or $500. I bought that initially, and I went through and just watched the videos. And in the first week, I got three retainers at $25,000. Two ten and one $5,000 retainers in 7 days from just watching a set of videos. So that was more of a how-to. The other is just, what is possible. I hear all the time within my franchise system and even some other firms when I say this, both of my recruiters that work for me, they make 125 dials every day. And guess what? They still have time left over. So if you think that 125 dials in a day is too much for somebody, that's a limiting belief for you. I just got an acceptance yesterday for, I'm going to move you mentioned sourcing. We're moving to a sourcing model where somebody's just setting appointments, and I hired a sourcer. She's in Mexico, and I'm expecting her to do 150 to 200 dials every day. So quit limiting yourself. And she's just going to set appointments for my recruiters and myself just to have conversations and do RPs and MPs. So limiting beliefs was another thing I wasn't aware of, that I was limiting myself on the level of activity that we were capable of doing each day. And my recruiters don't complain about doing 125 dials a day. You can do 125 dials by noon if you just sit there and knock it out. And you can sit there the rest of the day.
So what do you put in place? Do you use a researcher? How do you, to efficiently build those lists to make sure there's enough for people to call?
Yeah. Well, I've got two recruiters, but my research is separate. I've got a full-time researcher that does the research. And if I were a solo person wanting to start, that's the first person I would hire, somebody to do the research for you. And then maybe have them doing some sourcing calls and just setting appointments up with you as well, too, if they have the time to do that. Because it just takes a huge amount of time off of you that somebody at a lower cost can take care of. We got a new job on Friday. My researcher yesterday identified 100 prospects for that new job. My recruiter started making those dials this morning. So my recruiters don't have to go out and do any research at all. All they're doing is, making calls, doing MPs or RPs.
And so pretty much, if I heard you correctly, one full-time researcher supporting the three of you and gives
Yes.
you more than enough.
Yeah. Plenty enough. Yeah.
And what other shifts have you made about how you've thought about the business? I know you've been like a mindset client. One of the coaches we give people, they get a strategy coach and they get a mindset coach. What are the shifts you've made in mindset that has enabled a lot of these things to happen without working longer and harder?
I think you made a point earlier that when you hire this appointment setter, they're not going to be as efficient as me. It may take them twice as many, but they're 1/10 of the cost of me. So it doesn't matter that they're half as efficient when they're 1/10 of the cost.
Awesome. Awesome. And from a standpoint of, because you talked about, you're leveraging your team. What are the things you do? What do you put in place with your team from an accountability standpoint to make sure they're hitting their targets without being
We
a micromanager?
we meet every morning for 15 minutes. Now, Mondays, it's usually a little bit longer. We sit on Monday, we just talk about the priorities. We've got standard sequences and cadences that they use. So everybody knows what jobs we're working on this week. Each day, I look at, how many dials, how many MPs, how many RPs we're having. It goes up and down each day. I look at it more on the weekly basis. We look at, where were we at to target last week? On a day by day basis, it can go up and down, but I expect them to make 125 dials every single day. And if somebody's not making that many dials, I'm going to ask them why. I never have that problem because I set that expectation with these two that I've got today. So I never have to bring it up. We put it up on the screen, each day. Here's what the numbers were for yesterday. At the end of the week, here's where we were at versus target last week for dials, RPs, MPs, job orders, and FTIs. And we show an actual versus plan for the prior week. But I don't, on a day-to-day basis, I don't have those conversations. They know what the expectations are. We measure it, daily and weekly, and they hit it.
And in your time with us, how much has percentage wise has revenue grown over the last few years, last couple of years?
About 3x.
3x?
Yeah, close to 3x. Yeah.
So it can't be, then it's not expensive.
No,
I'm
no, it's
kidding.
not. No. Yeah.
Anything else you would want to say from a tips wise, giving, we've got a mix here of people with teams and solo operators uh, on implementing or on time management techniques that you've learned that you can pass on?
It just goes back to mindset. You just have to make that decision. That's what you want to do, and set some targets and then just execute to them daily. You're not going to hit them 100% every day in and day out every day, but when you miss them, ask yourself why and try to make just little tweaks as you go to get more consistent and more consistent. We were looking at my metrics this morning. Between my two recruiters and myself, there's three people. Through December, we've done 57,394 dials this year. Okay, so I can tell you the exact number. I'm looking at another screen right now and seeing those, but I can tell you every single metric. And if you measure it and hold yourself accountable, you'll deliver on average. You'll have the ups and downs, but on average, you'll hit your targets.
Yeah, we've never seen a client or even running my recruiting firm, once we were able to reverse engineer the right number, that if they hit those targets, didn't hit the revenue goal. It's never happened.
Wouldn't like to think, Mike, focus on FTIs. That's the number one thing. And I don't know how you made this meeting happen today, but today, this afternoon at 1 o'clock, we will hit our annual FTI target. So it is today.
FTI's first time interviews.
Yeah.
First time interviews. So those that don't know. So you could take the rest of the year off.
Yeah, absolutely could if I wanted to.
You wanted. Congratulations. That's an outstanding achievement. I'm glad to be here to celebrate with you. And again, congratulations on all your success and achieving the Perseus Award again and again. Appreciate your time. You're welcome to hang out with us. Any other parting thoughts, or otherwise, I'm just very, very grateful for the time you shared with us.
No, last thing is focus on FTIs.